Hey Guardian, I've got just one question for you. Explosions? What if I did my entire video from back here? Are you disappointed by the lack of ass-blasting fireball explosions in Destiny 2? Do you wish you had some type of one-shot ability but have too much self-respect to stoop low enough to use stasis? Do you wish to cause general chaos and mayhem in the Crucible? Well, do I have a build for you. This is what I'm calling the Ashen Wolves, or maybe the Fuse Tube. I'm really not sure. Drop an idea in the comments down below because I haven't decided yet. This build makes use of some really fun and interesting stuff. Stuff that we don't see much in the Crucible anymore, nevertheless is incredibly strong, incredibly effective, and I'm going to teach you about it. So, first and foremost, this build will be used in another video on our second channel, which just started. If you're a fan of the channel, you might not know, we've made a second channel. If you want to see us trying to do a speed run of Iron Banner, trying to essentially any % Iron Banner, go check out the second channel. It'll be up probably Tuesday, hopefully, assuming all goes well. And another thing I want to tell you is that this video will be broken up into two parts. The first part will be about the build itself, the general weapons, the general armor, the stats, the mods, etc. The second half of the video will be about some general strategies how to best optimize this build. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's cause some freaking explosions. Everyone knows all good Noob-Tube builds come built with some type of fully automatic weapon. In our case, we are going to be using the Forward Path. It is a Iron Banner 600 auto rifle. It can roll with some pretty fantastic perks. What I'm using here in particular is dynamic sway reduction, swashbuckler, and for my mod, I am running targeting adjuster. This makes the weapon in general just very, very consistent. Also, because I will be using melees later on in the build, the swashbuckler occasionally can get a 5x proc, which allows me to basically instantly melt the next Guardian. This weapon is very, very consistent. If you want to switch this out for something, you could totally do that, as generally speaking, this weapon is just sort of a fill-in. I like the consistency that this has, but if you have something that in particular you really want to run, you guys know me, I am actually like clinically allergic to running meta weaponry, so running a 120 hand cannon right now is a no-go for me, but if you want to run a 120 hand cannon, totally go for it. It will absolutely work. It'll probably end up actually working a little bit better in terms of the damage numbers, which you'll see here in just a bit. But yeah, that's generally what I'm running here for our kinetic weapon. The second thing that is important and something that I am amazed gets overlooked is the Lord of Wolves. This shotgun, for whatever reason, has flown under the radar, but nevertheless, it is an absolute powerhouse. This thing makes Fellwinters look weak, and I'm not exaggerating. This thing has slightly more range. It can burn through supers. It'll literally melt the stasis supers. One little piece of advice if you do happen to pick up the Lord of Wolves is do not use it in the Release the Wolves mode. It's really not worth it. I was lucky enough to go ahead and get the catalyst with this, which makes the stability when the Release the Wolves is not active really, really good. But in general, the recoil is pretty up and down, so just generally push down on the stick and you'll be fine. Like I said, don't use the Release the Wolves. It just spreads out the shots too much. It's really not worth it, alright? For the heavy, I don't really care what you run. Honestly, unless you're running an exotic heavy, it really doesn't matter what you're running because you're not getting heavy that much. Just run with whatever you're comfortable with, alright? On to the armor. Let's start with the stat split. So I don't have the greatest of stats in general. I'm sure if you're a Titan main, you probably have way more stats just allocated around. I'm running a 60 mobility, 70 resilience, 60 recovery, 50 for the grenade, 30 for intellect, and 40 for discipline. However you want to split it, the two things you are really focusing on here is primarily recovery and your grenade, which was what we're going to build into here. You've probably seen it from the thumbnail. We're running for our exotic armor piece, the Ashen Wake. This armor piece, just like the Lord of Wolves, is surprisingly underrated. I was amazed. Are you guys... Okay, if I can be real for a second. You guys know I don't like Titans. I don't typically make Titan builds, but oh my gosh, is Ashen Wake a ton of fun. What does it do in case you maybe have it in your vault and it's been collecting dust? It allows your fusion grenades to instantly explode. Now, on paper, that's like, okay, that's kind of cool. That sounds kind of neat. But recently, maybe like a year ago, maybe that's not that recent, but it got a buff. What it does now is if you happen to get a grenade kill with one of those fusion grenades, obviously, you will get your fusion grenade back. Like the whole thing in Crucible. So what this means is that if you're able to start the fight with one of your other weapons and then end it with an Ashen Wake fusion grenade, you'll get another grenade ready to go. It takes like a quarter second, but Yeah, and you're able to just keep this train a rolling. This is what I call one of these builds, by the way. This build is a kind of an engine build, if that makes sense. So think a build that kind of like gets a little bit of steam, a little bit of momentum, and then just keeps rolling. This is one of those builds. We're going to talk more about the strategy as we get into it, but this is the thing to keep in mind. You do not need fastball. It kind of comes built in with the armor piece, so don't even worry about having to run fastball with this if you want to get the most efficacy. In terms of the actual things I'm running on it for in terms of mods, I'm running Impact Induction. This allows me to get my grenade back a little bit faster off of melee hits, which I will be doing. So yeah, definitely something to keep in mind. If you want to run something like a loader, great. I don't see anything wrong with that either. For the rest of the armor, in general, just try to prop up the weapon. One thing that is interesting to call out here, if you want to go for a super heavy build, like a lot of supers in a game, run Ashes to Assets, like double Ashes to Assets, and run a really high intellect stat. You'll see why once we start to get into the strategy, as I'm sure you're seeing the gameplay in the background. You probably already picked up on it. In general, though, I run auto rifle targeting because I find that the grenade strings don't happen as much as me just generally using my auto rifle and wanting a little bit more ADS speed and tracking. For my chest piece here, I'm just running unflinching, and I happen to run high energy fire as well. If you don't have the energy to run high energy fire, that is fine. Just run something that helps the unflinching on both the shotgun. Yes, you will need it on the shotgun because the Lord of Wolves, remember, is not instant. It's kind of like a fusion rifle in that regard. So you want to be able to not get flinched off of your shot as you're dropping the target. And unflinching auto rifle because, of course, we will run that. It's just a given. For our legs, it's the same thing you would see in any Crucible build. You want to run a Scavenger, you want to run Traction if you're on console. If you're not on console, replace Traction with something else, I suppose, or maybe run double Scavs, whatever you're comfortable with. It really doesn't matter that much. For our Mark, our Titan Mark, it's really crucial that you run a Solar Titan Mark and you run double Bomber. This will help you to get your grenades back a little bit faster. It used to be that you couldn't run both Bomber and Ashes to Assets, but now you can. So you can get your grenades up pretty damn often. In fact, a lot of the times you'll see me just throw a shield in the middle of nowhere just to get the Bomber energy. I also run on this charged up, as I tend to find myself whenever I do get charged with light, I tend to get around 3 orbs of light when it comes around, so it allows me to just pick up that extra stack. I had the room for it. You probably will have the room for it too if you run double Bomber and a recovery mod like I do, so why not slot it? If you want to run something else, go for it. In fact, if you come up with a charged with light, like PvP focused part of this build, let me know. Like if you have some type of particular combo that's really nasty, let me know. I don't have all of the mods, so I'm curious if there's a mod I'm missing that would really make this thing take off. As for our subclass, what we're going to be using, of course, is the fusion grenades. I run a towering barricade and stray flip. The only thing that's really required here is honestly the fusion grenade for obvious reasons as we're making it work with the Ashen Wake. But if you don't want to run stray flip, that is fine. If you don't want to run towering barricade, you're a weirdo, but that's fine. But the subclass itself, for the actual tree node we are picking middle tree. The one with the throwing hammers, the one where you get to pretend play Thor, yeah, that one. First and foremost, the throwing hammer is actually pretty damn nice, as it combos well with the grenade. You can throw the hammer out, follow it with the grenade, and if you both of them land, that's a kill right there. On top of that, once we start to talk about the rest of the strategy of the build, the throwing hammer can operate as sort of a fill-in for the grenade itself, which is really nice because sometimes you don't have a grenade up, but you've got a lot of stacks of what we are going to talk about here, Roaring Flames. If you are not a middle tree Titan connoisseur, you might underestimate the power of Roaring Flames. In particular, Roaring Flames with the Ashen Wake is nutty. So what essentially happens is every time you get an ability kill, you will get 1 stack of Roaring Flames. This stack lasts for 20 seconds. It raises the damage, I would say, roughly 16%, 15%, somewhere around there. It essentially brings it to when you get 2 stacks of Roaring Flames, your Ashen Wake fusion grenades will one-shot Guardians, assuming they aren't higher light than you, and they aren't in super or something weird like that, like an Overshield or something like that. This means that once you get your Ashen Wake and your Roaring Flames all ready to go, your grenades up, your everything set, you can just start running around and just carpet bombing people. You can become an AC-130, just shooting people down as you're flying over the top of them. At only 2 stacks. That means you only need 2 ability kills, whether that be from the hammer or that be from the grenade itself, within roughly 20 seconds of one another in order to get it to this point. Once Roaring Flames gets to 3 stacks, then the hammer will one-shot. And like I said, because the hammer can kind of fill in for it, there will be times where you don't have the grenade and you've got the hammer. And because the hammer also, because of the Tireless Warrior perk, gets you your health back, there are some times in closer ranges that I prefer to go with the hammer rather than the grenade because I'm afraid of blowing myself up. It's quite nice. This also, Roaring Flames also triggers on the super, so if you get 3, I guess even 2 kills in your super, as soon as you come out, you essentially still have a super. You essentially still have like what is essentially like a discount Walmart version of the normal Sunbreaker super, because your grenades are now essentially that hammer, just, you know, obviously on a different button bind. And, you know, no damage resistance and such, right? But yes, even if you get just 2 stacks or just 2 kills in your super, you are now primed and ready to go. Which brings us into the strategy. In general, don't force the engagement. That would be the biggest thing. If I could give you any advice, do not force the engagement. A lot of the times you'll find yourself when you're first starting out with this, you'll be trying to find yourself forcing the grenade kill. Don't. Generally speaking, I'll make the grenade kill happen if they're roughly mid-range. I'll get a few tags on them with the forward path. I'll throw the grenade and dip back into cover while the grenade is still in the air. I'll probably get the kill. I'll tend to aim at the feet, by the way, as well. If you can kind of get a little bit of elevation to make that a little bit easier, then do that as well. You don't have to be super on top of them either, as long as it's generally close. So that means if you happen to tag a target and they dip around cover and you know their foot is sticking out, like you're getting ready to go for them toes, throw the grenade at them toes and you'll probably get the kill. If you don't have the grenade up, of course, you can go for the throwing hammer. In fact, in general, if they're kind of more close to medium range, like that space in between, kind of like where a Fellwinter's Lie would hit, so essentially anywhere from 12 to 4 meters, you know, that range, go for the hammer, as you'll generally be less likely to blow yourself up, as typically people just press the W key to try to get the W themselves, and sometimes you'll find yourselves kind of unintentionally blowing yourselves up because they decided to beat their chest and scream "Ooh," as they try to ape you down, so you might find yourself kind of trading with that target because you blew up. Throwing hammer's a better option here because you don't let that happen. On top of that, you'll probably just pick up the hammer straight, as the hammer will bounce back into your hands. You'll get a little bit of health back, which allows you to set up for the next target, and you can kind of just generally swing it from there. Whatever you end up doing, make sure that you pepper the target with a little bit of damage before you go in. Just remember that the hammer does less damage than the grenade. That will throw you off. It threw me off a few times. So you're going to need to deal a roughly 80 damage with the forward path before you throw the hammer, and roughly 50 damage with the forward path before you throw the grenade, okay? Once you get it up to 2 stacks, the grenade is an insta-kill. Once you get up to 3 stacks, like I said, the hammer is an insta-kill. The super is something to keep in mind as well, as it is a strange super. It's not anything, there's not a whole lot that is really like it. It feels weird. You'll have a little bit of a, it'll feel awkward the first few times you use it. Use the light attack to generally move yourself around. You can also use this to get out of stasis. It can be quite nice. If somebody throws a dust field on you, you can use the spin to win to actually get yourself out of the stasis and then slam it down. That will track around corners too. In fact, I highly encourage you to use it to track around corners because you're very, very slow and you're very, very upright. Targets that have good target acquisition to your dome ski will find ways to shoot it out, and you won't really have a whole lot of chance to use it. Even though you're a little bit tankier than some of the other supers, it is very easy to shut you down, so use the range that you've got on that super. It will explode targets in the air as well. It'll go over like small, like foot high-ish type of step-ups as well. So if you need to, like, you know, hit a target that's kind of on a little bit of a raise or like up some stairs, it'll still do that. But in general, just be careful when you're in your super. In fact, a lot of the times I find myself generally preferring not to use my super, as my grenade pretty much is just a better version of that super, as I can just literally see a target, blow the target up. Once you get more comfortable with it, don't be afraid to go for longer range yeets as well, because most targets aren't expecting it. They're really not. And if you tag them for literally just 50 damage, their shield's not popped, they'll probably still stay in with that engagement. If you can get good at throwing that grenade at a further distance, you will catch them off guard. And then once you get those stacks going, you can start slinging into the next, into the next, into the next, into the next, and you legitimately can start going on like team wiping sprees. If you're running the double ashes to assets as sort of the alternate version of this build, then you can get even more supers more often with it. Another alternate version to take with this build is you want to run bottom tree. You'll be able to get those sunspots. You won't be able to get the one-shot grenades off of it, but in general, you'll find yourself being able to get your grenades back a little bit more often and be able to crowd control a little bit more. I would say if you're a fan of the channel, you might know what this means. Bottom tree is more of a gamma style of play style if you wanted to do it that way, whereas middle is more of an alpha, maybe even beta play style. All in all, this build is incredibly fun. Really, give it a try. If you're tired of stasis and PvP and you want to essentially swing back, this is the way to go. If you want to see this build used as we are trying to do, like I mentioned earlier in the video, an any percent speedrun of Iron Banner using this build, and you want to see some funny stuff that happens in the meantime, go check out the second channel. The link will be in the description down below. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or any suggestions for builds of your own that you want to see me feature. If it's good enough, if it's interesting enough, and it's not, again, I am clinically allergic to the meta, so if you drop something in the comments that is meta, I will break out in hives, and you'll probably send me to the doctor, okay? So please don't do that. But if you've got an interesting off-meta build that is also powerful, let me know. I'll be more than happy to review it and give you the credit for it. All right? Hope you guys enjoyed. Share the video around. Bless your faces. Oh, and subscribe. Deuces!